My name is Lucinda Evans, and I am the founder, member, and director of Philisa Abafazi Women and Family Centre, which is in Steenberg in Cape Town in South Africa.
So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the kind of work you're doing with Philisa Abafazi in Cape Town, and what projects are you working on?
So I work in gender-based violence prevention with an element of child protection as well. And then I have 2 emergency safe houses. The one is for women with their children that are victims of gender-based violence and intimate partner violence. In November of 2021, I opened a second emergency 4-bed facility for an LGBTQI victim of gender-based violence that identifies as transgender or gay male. And then also for the first for our province, I also opened an emergency 4-bed facility for a heterosexual male that are a victim of gender-based violence. And this 2 new facilities is a 7-day emergency facility where our social worker will try and put an emergency plan in place for the victim, and then we'll find alternative placement for the person. This is the safe house side. We are also providing direct services for women and also men that would come to our center in need of advice. Sometimes it's assistance to get a protection order, also intervention, sometimes with the police, because the services that are there to protect all victims of gender-based violence, we have good policies, but it's flawed. And so service delivery in that particular field is a huge challenge. And sometimes we have to keep the police, the criminal justice system accountable for not doing what they're supposed to do, and that is act within the law, implement the law, or give the services. And then we also run a child protection program. And the child protection program is in the form of an after-school program, which children from the ages of 6 to 13, this is within the after-school program age, they will come in the afternoon for a program that looks at homework, that looks at, we're working a lot in trauma. We use mediums of surfing and marimba music and art therapy as therapeutic interventions, but we also teach children how to remain resilient within a context of violence, because most of their homes are violent. Then we also have a older persons program where we have senior citizens from the age of 61 to 99 can come to the center. And this program is very much looking at also the protection of older persons, because older persons are also violated. They also experience gender-based violence. But our club is very unique, where it's not just about coming and tell us how old and sick you are. It's interactive, it's vibrant. We have different activities within the scope of GBV prevention. And then we also work with young people that are in high school in the youth intervention program, because we also understand that in some instances the gangs are recruiting young people between the ages of 13 and 18. So we look at a intervention and an alternative to gangsterism, where we do youth career building, volunteerism, life skills, drug prevention, but also just holistically looking at child protection at a level up, where we offer the same kind of protection services to young people. Yeah.
Maybe you can tell us a bit about Lavender Hill, where your NGO is located, and you already mentioned gangs and everything. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the situation living there, what it's like.
We actually moved from Lavender Hill. Our service is still directly for Lavender Hill, and our beneficiaries are 90% from Lavender Hill. But in the heart of COVID-19, we received funding from World Childhood Foundation, the Queen Sylvia, and we actually built a family center from 26 shipping containers. And this was dire needed because we were operating in Lavender Hill, which started off in my home for 9 years, in my family home. And then we had another venue where we worked from. It was too small. So I'm still a resident of Lavender Hill. And our current situation, I'm now in Germany, and this morning we heard about there were gang violence, and one of the community leaders' family members were shot and killed. And in the same time, there was a huge shack fire. So Lavender Hill is an area where people that lived on the prime lands is District 6, Claremont, Simonstown, Constantia. Back in the day of apartheid, our people were living on the prime land. And with the apartheid law, the Group Areas Act, people were just picked up and put on the Cape Flats. And we had no choice. Our great-grandmothers, our grandmothers didn't have a choice. And they were evicted from the land, and they were put in areas like Lavender Hill and Mitchell's Plain. And the infrastructure of Lavender Hill has not really changed in the last 45 to 50 years. People were thrown in 3-story flats where you had a family of 15 people living in a 2-roomed bedroom flat, where there was unemployment. And in the last 15 years, people in Lavender Hill looked for alternative space because it was second and third generation of families, and the informal settlement started. So you have a community where you have brick built-up houses, duplexes, flats, triple stories, and then you also have the informal settlement. And as a nation, Khoisan people, our people were the very first people that walked the land in South Africa on the beaches. We lost our language through colonization. We lost our identity. Through apartheid, we were thrown into Lavender Hill. And with that, apartheid was a very violent era. It conditioned people violently. We have never had the opportunity to be debriefed about all of this violence. So we have people living together, and there are violence in the area. And so where I live in Lavender Hill, there's a portion in Lavender Hill where people think, when I say to them, I'm not directly affected by the violence. It's sometimes I can hear the gunshots in the far side, but it's not right where I am. Although I live in the heart of Lavender Hill, and you find two worlds. In the beginning, when the services were still at my home, I had women and their families coming day and night. We had no office hours. We would be awake maybe from 1 o'clock in the morning. We had domestic violence, but we also have community violence. We have poverty, and we have drug abuse. And as a nation that have lost our language, we lost our identity, we lost our land, we were conditioned of violence. Sadly, the generational violence has also continued in a community like Lavender Hill and many other communities on the Cape Flats.
Would you say that is also one of the biggest challenges in your work, this intergenerational violence, or what would you identify as what the challenges you have to face in your day-to-day work?
I think if I look at not exclusively what Philisa Abafazi does as an organization, there are many organizations in Lavender Hill that are doing sterling work under the leadership of women, under the leadership of men. Also, I'm in a country where patriarchy is still the order of the day. And so the pick of the day is what are we actually fighting for? I think the biggest injustice that happened to people in my community is the loss of land and language and identity. Secondly, it's just not the day-to-day violence or the month-to-month violence or the domestic violence, but it is the inequality of women in my country still not being recognized. I mean, in Germany at the moment, and the support from a church that is supporting us, my country, my province, should be the custodians of making sure that Philisa Abafazi has support. But it has taken me to go not outside of the boundaries of my community, but outside of my country to look for support. It is still the day-to-day struggles for women in South Africa. I'm not the only one. There are phenomenal women, women of color, that is from day to day just saying, but we want to have our equal right. If we look at the structure of our government, nowhere is there a number one or a number two. Our deputy president is not a woman, and neither is the president. The deputy premier of the Western Cape is not a woman, and neither is the premier. The deputy minister of police is not a woman, and neither is the minister of police. So we have these men in the country that is making decisions on our bodies every day. We have a very high rate of femicide in our country. We have a high rate of gender-based violence in our country. And in 2019, I formed part of a march called Am I Next? And the president of our country, he made these promises to 20,000 women. I was one of them, where he said, you know, if somebody kills, there will be no bail. If people that have raped, there will be no parole. If you murder, there will be no bail. And nothing has happened. You know, if we just look at the cases that have made news, if you look at who the perpetrators were, they were paroled people, which the system had lost. Out on parole, the system lost them. They came and they killed women and children. If we look at where our country is currently at the moment in terms of rape, and the fact that DNA, the DNA system, the institution that has to check DNA, there is such a big backlog, 2 to 3 years, where there are still families that are still waiting for closure. If we look at court cases of murdered women and children, we currently have a case of a young child that was abducted by a man. It was on parole. It's almost 3 years, and the case is only now on the roll. And they found out that he had committed more sexual offences and rapes. He was lost in the system because he was a paroled rapist. So my fight ultimately is justice in this day. It is the equality for us as women. It is that our sisters, our daughters, our aunties, our omas be safe. But it's also further. I recognize as a woman in South Africa that the next government should be women, and I'm unapologetic about it. I recognize that if we want to change the policy, we need to do it ourselves. And because we are seeing where we're going at this current moment. I'm a patriarch of my country. I love my country. I don't love currently what is happening in our country when it comes to the lives of women, children, but I also include men. On the Cape Flats where we are, one of the things that I've done was, just before I came to Germany, I wrote a letter to the watchdog of the South African Police Services, and I took our own police station. It's called Steenberg. And I said in my letter, I wrote a letter to the Human Rights Commission. Up until today, they haven't responded. They haven't acknowledged receipt of my email. And the Human Rights Commission in South Africa is the highest body next to the Concord or under the Concord that needs to see that, you know, the human rights is enforced, or investigate if you report. But anyway, I wrote and I said, the circumstances that the Steenbok police officers are working in, they're working in circumstances that's almost to a small civil war. It's war. They are not protected. They are not adequately skilled, and they are not adequately equipped to protect themselves. How can they protect me and us? And I wrote this huge letter, and I wrote it to the Human Rights Commission and to the watchdogs, and I said, I'm demanding an investigation into the fact that there's not enough police officers at Steenbok Police Station, because the system there already is broken. And in that broken system, we expect one police van to protect 65,000 people. How? If somebody's killed, that police vehicle has to stand there because they have to secure the murder scene and somebody has to come and investigate. So in that time, a child gets missing, a woman gets raped, somebody gets hijacked, who's going to protect us? And the reason why I wrote this letter in this fashion is, who takes care of the caregivers? Who protects the protectors? And having said that, it also made me look at, I feel at times that, we've reached our ceiling in activism. How much more do we need to stand with a placard? How much more do we need to block the streets? How much more do we take our t-shirts off and stand in our bras and saying, enough is enough? I think the next step for me would be, if I had the funding, I will take the South African government to the Constitutional Court. I would. Because they have a fiduciary responsibility. President Cyril Ramaphosa and his cabinet have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that women in this country is safe. No lip service, because his lip service is politically correct to diffuse 20,000 angry women. That day we're just asking for protection. I think I'm at the point, I'm even thinking, I'm at the point where I say, if a group of lawyers want to do pro bono work and we take the government to the Constitution Court, number one, the Constitution needs to be ratified. The Constitution was written in a time when there was no rights, there were no human rights. The old apartheid people, somebody like me would have been taken, thrown in a police cell, tortured, kept for months and months and months. Nobody would know where I am. I would either die or I would come out maimed and so forth. And so the Constitution was written to make sure that those type of atrocities never happens. But the Constitution as it stands does not protect my life. It doesn't guarantee my safety or the safety of the women in this country. It doesn't hold the criminal justice system accountable for one case takes a priority because the president has put his voice around it. So one case took 3 months. So in 2019, we had these 2 huge cases of 2 university students that was killed. One was at the University of Cape Town and one was at the University of the Western Cape. They were killed in the same month. One case got the president's attention and there was a presidential intervention and the student had a presidential funeral. And there was special appointed magistrate to deal with the case. And between 3 months, the case was done. There was a prosecution. The other student, the case is still ongoing now. They will be, in the next couple of weeks, there will be a sentencing. And when I say this, the inequality still of the Khoisan people, that the one girl was a Khoisan girl and the other one wasn't. And so we need to keep the government accountable for failure to act equally all to all people. And I can cite more things. We don't even speak about farm murders because farm murders doesn't even reach the news. many farm people are killed. We never reach it. And so the one big case that has now reached the news is this man, and I don't want to put people in racial boxes, but it is huge in the country, where a 13-year-old boy went and he picked a mango from a tree, and then this man got into his pickup and he chased the child, grabbed the child, took the child home, killed the child and chopped the child up, his body up. And at the moment, there is a spotlight on this place called Klaver. When the community then picketed at the court, the police came in heavy-handed and were violent towards the community. If we look at Klaver as a community, there are a huge unemployment there. We in the metropole as services for children and women, there's no organizations that does any child protection work or any women work. We look at the poverty. I mean, I've been to many places in South Africa doing intervention work with children, and when these tragedies happen with children, Philisa Abafazi is an organization. We come and we do play therapy through play with children. I have never seen children as neglected as children in Klaver. I've never seen children with, fetal alcohol syndrome. You can even see the outer that, fast children. I've never seen some children that look like they haven't had a bath for weeks. And I asked the question, Klaver is nearly 4 hours drive from where we are. And when we went there that day, it was the day after the child's funeral. Because the issue was these children were hungry and they saw the fruit. We took 1,000 pieces of fruit with us, all shapes and sizes, apples, pears, bananas. And we made big bags of fruit. And initially they told us there would just be 100 children. 400 children then came. We issued all these bags out, but we left. And the question to be asked is, who's going to advocate for the rest of the children? There's a court case here, and now the person has to go for a psychiatric evaluation and that process. But what about the rest of the children of Klaver? What about the fact that children might drop out of school in primary school and nobody's advocating them, nobody's looking for them? Who's addressing the issue of huge, these children with fetal alcohol syndrome? So the parents are drinking. Who's doing intervention? So, we sit in a situation where these huge, and I'm thinking in my mother tongue, I'll get to the word, these human rights violations is continuously. And therefore I'm saying, the people that needs to be kept accountable is the South African government. We need to take them to the Constitutional Court. Number one, so that the president have been made responsible, because he's the custodian to protection of women and children. The fact that there's no other investigations into a place like Klaver. There's no recourse for one case to drag 3 years and one case to be 3 months. So he's the one, and his cabinet, to be kept accountable and responsible for just failure to execute the Constitution. But the Constitution also needs to be really looked at, because it speaks a little bit about the protection of all. It doesn't speak specific. And therefore, I'm also saying that we maybe should look at a referendum to change some of the things that is in the Constitution. That's not guaranteeing my protection as a Khoisan woman at the moment. Ourself and herself is that the support that I think could have happened to us more than 14 years ago, or in this 14 years, didn't come. And therefore I had to do collaboration and form work in solidarity with other organizations and structures to support us. 1 Billion Rising Movement Global is one of the organizations that Philisa Abafazi is a partner with. And the 1 Billion Rising global campaign is my holding net in terms of, women's work, empowerment work. And then there are other women in my country that I work within structures, and we have formed the 1 Billion Rising South Africa movement, where women will support other women. And whether it's a call for support, there's a call case, or a call for support in saying this is bad and we don't agree. And if there's a call to write letters to authorities, then we make it a collective call. But the solidarity is also something that we really need to think about in terms of going to the Concord, keeping the government accountable. Radical feminism, of course, is something that I'm known for, and at times I've been lynched for saying it as it is. And you have to look at, it's not about you, because it's bigger than you as a leader. It is about the greater good. It's about understanding that when something is wrong, it's wrong. And whichever way it's going to be sugar-coated, like the president came in 2019, 5 September, and he lied to us. He lied to us in saying he will ensure that perpetrators of rape and femicide and gender-based violence never get bail. He lied. And he needs to be kept accountable. And everywhere where I come, I will say this, that the number one man in a position with power to protect us, he cannot protect us. He doesn't want to protect us. There's no political will to protect us. So I don't believe in things like 16 days of activism. I don't believe in it. I don't celebrate it. We have a beautiful celebration called Women's Month in August, where over 20,000 women in 1956 marched with the dompas and burned it, who helped the liberation struggle. Where are the women? Where are the generations of those women, their daughters, their sisters? Where are their national government? Who speaks about my vagina? There's no one. And so I've not given any of these current men permission to make these decisions for me. And if I have the resources and the will, I will contest the next elections, even if it's just locally. Because if we want to make those differences, it has to be one of us. If we want to change the policy, it has to be one of us. But also, if we want to keep people accountable for failure to protect us, we have to drive that process ourselves.
You've talked about the backlash you've received and also the various challenges for yourself. But what keeps you motivated, or what gives you the strength to keep on fighting, even though it's very hard and you're putting yourself at risk at times also?
I'm always at risk, but I have a daughter. I have a daughter and I have a son. I raised my children in the understanding what equality should be in my home. But I have a daughter that's not able to be free and to get on the autobahn and travel at night. She can never travel on a train on her own. If she gets on an Uber, she takes her tracker with. And that's wrong. Because 27 years ago, we were free from apartheid. But women in our country, we are not completely free. Yeah, we are free from an oppressor, but we are still oppressed in the fact that there are things like violence in the country. And that is my motivation every day. My motivation is also the other women and families that entrust their daughters to our program, and the after school, in the youth program, and their sons. And so we change the narratives for our young boys that comes to the program, and we are modeling them that violence is not the answer. And we hope that in the next generation, I might not be here, that the intervention of the different narratives through the organization for the boys, that they would be able to say, no, I am my sister's keeper. And for our young girls in the program to say, my destiny is not the kitchen. And to just have children and be a wife. No, we have to, our young girls have to inspire to be the next president of the country. That is what is still keeping me motivated, jumping out of bed. And I crawl to bed at night. My work at best is not easy. It is hard. It is even harder that in the midst of where people are so negative and is it ever going to come right, to remain as a beacon. And sometimes my beacon light is a bit dim, but at most I try to keep the beacon light going, not just for myself but others. And so I also believe that passing the baton on and allowing younger women in our space and allowing ideas, allowing other perspective of how can we ensure that justice still happens in this daytime. And somebody says, but when? I said, in this daytime, in this lifetime. It might not be our lifetime, but we continue to plant seeds. Plant seeds about what is justice. When are we going to get justice? When are we going to keep people accountable? And so on the milli scale, I keep people like the police accountable. They have to account. I keep local government accountable because they have a fiduciary responsibility. I keep the local councillors accountable. If the service doesn't happen, I write to your premier. I write to the mayor in keeping people accountable. Sorry.
We at the Fritz Bauer Forum, we've created the interactive Fritz Bauer library where we collect the stories of human rights activists from all over the world, from past and from the present as well, in hopes to join a network of solidarity among human rights fighters across the world. Do you think this is what we can do? This is in order to enhance the voices of so many different struggles for human rights around the world? Is this the right way to go? Or what would you say is how can we, create solidarity among human rights struggles around the world?
I think it's a good idea because we can only learn from each other's best practices. What has worked in your country? What can work in my country? What are the struggles that you've gone through that I could learn? What is the struggles that I've gone through and solutions that we could learn from each other? Because it's important. It's important that I should be speaking to my sisters in other countries or other activists in other countries just to number one, you are not feeling alone. And number two, if I can support a sister in Germany and she can support me in South Africa, even if she says in Germany it's wrong and she puts it on her socials, I'm supporting my sister in South Africa, and I do vice versa. And the beauty of the 1 Billion Rising movement is that we celebrate every February, we celebrate V-Day. But if something happens in the respective countries, like in the Ukraine, the atrocities that has happened to women, and even in my little voice here in Cape Town at the foot of Africa, I just said something, I'm in solidarity of Ukraine. The sisters in Ukraine might never hear my voice, but here, when we speak about solidarity, it speaks about I am because you are. This is Ubuntu. It's a word that we use in South Africa. But I am because you are, because in Ukraine, where women currently are facing and in the war, and the whole world is watching. But what is the whole world doing? We never ever thought that anybody would go into war. It could happen with us as well in South Africa. What is the world going to do? Are they going to help us? Are they going to look? Are they going to allow? And then I want to say to the world, shame on you. Shame on you for allowing this inhuman event to take place and just watching and doing nothing. Cease is in my mother tongue. And it's shameful because there's women and children and men and older persons. How are they ever going to recover from this mass trauma?
Maybe going back a little bit to your work, your day-to-day work with Philisa Abafazi, I came across a quote from Fritz Bauer which said something along the lines of, in order to unlock the good that is in every person, you have to create the conditions for this person to grow and to be able to be seen as a human being. Would you agree with this, or did you see this in your day-to-day work with Philisa Abafazi as well?
I think everybody has inherent goodness. We are all good. Sometimes people say, these gangsters, they are bad. What they're doing is bad, yes. But they all came from good homes. And something in their lives has gone wrong. I think where we find ourselves as an organization, what we do invites people to come, and sometimes they don't see the good, or what I would say potential, or their gift. And so many people that come and engage with us and interact with us and volunteer with us and work for us, they discover their light, they discover their potential, and they discover their good and nurture their good. And for those that already know their good, just builds onto their good. So amongst all the other things that we do as an organization, we also say to people that crosses our path, you come into this organization for one of three reasons. Yeah, you come to volunteer and work with us, but also you come and you find yourself. Because you cannot give from an empty cup. We don't ask people, we ask them, why do you want to come and work with us? But we also understand people have their own journeys and they have their own experience and their traumas and their pain. They are drawn to Philisa Abafazi for many reasons. So I say to people, if here you find yourself, the first thing you need to do is you fill your cup. If we look at this cup, there's water in it. If we have a saucer in it, if I pour more into this glass, the glass will overflow and the saucer will catch the overflow. What is in this glass is yours. You cannot give the community if your glass is there. You can only give the community in the overflow, which you take the glass away and you pick up the saucer, and what is in the saucer you can give to the community. So in Philisa Abafazi, you come and you fill your cup first, or whatever that means for you. And then the third one is that you come into this organization and you share your knowledge, your skill, and your gift. So as an organization, we are open to receiving volunteers, local and international volunteers. I don't ask what your bank balance is. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in your gift. What do you have that you can teach us, that we can pass on? And not us as the adults, the children, the youth, the older persons, the clients in the safe house, the person that comes in looking for help and support. That is what we're interested in. You can work a camera. How can you teach the young people about filming? How can you teach young people about cameras? That's what I'm interested in. But when you share your gift, you also get something back. And what you get back is what you place into this cup. And that's the value proposition that I look at as a person that is open to saying, and unequivocally, I say to people, you come in here and you are all good. You have to prove me wrong that you are not good. So yeah.
So maybe to kind of close off, what would you say are your hopes for the future or your wishes if you were to be very optimistic?
Well, I would say, yeah, in the future we have a government that looks much better with more women in it, and not the ones that in the government we're going to make the tea and write the minutes, but we are leading as number one. Number two, for Philisa, Abafazi, of course I want to expand the work of our organization, and especially in the uncharted fields of the LGBTQI, which for me is very important, because we only speak about gay and lesbian people at the festive days, the 16 days of activism, the Women's Month. These are the times that we speak, but we don't live our truth. There are still the gender segregation. It's a lot to do with religion, it's culture. But for us that look at life with the feminine lens, we need to be more inclusive. So I'm inclusive, excuse me. It's also, it's more than just the emergency safe house for us. Everything that we do, we are bringing in the engendered lens. So it's not just about the t-shirt that I wear. It's about throughout our programs, people will see that we are promoting, advocating, workshopping, making our space available. Our language needs to change when it becomes inclusive, when we include the LGBTQI. And that is my next 3-year campaign, where I want to ensure that everywhere, Philisa Abafazi should not now be seen, because originally we were seen as a feminist organization that only worked with women and children. We've included providing services for men, and we are including the LGBTQI. And then also, the future is unpredictable also. I might have all of these plans, but ultimately, I would like to take our government to the Constitution Court to change, not just in a punitive manner, yeah, that too, but to change the rule book that is not making me feel comfortable and safe as a woman of South Africa.